the natural clearing didn't occur. So we've created yet more debt, and the equity market is now reflecting something else. And I struggled with that because this was never something I foresaw.
I would just like to step back and get your view on the state of the markets right now and stimulus. For someone like me who's been through enough cycles to sort of think they know something about it, this feels very uncomfortable. And it feels as if we're due for the mother of all corrections and we're just in uncharted territories here. I'd love to get your view of the state of play right now.
I've struggled with this as well, right? Because we all knew there's a debt super cycle. We knew there's problems with the financial system. And we all kind of thought the next recession, which was the one we've just had, was going to be a doozy. And we'd probably end up having to continue to see the ongoing mess that we saw in 2008. What happened was actually the reverse. We saw the largest ever recession outside of 1929, 1930. The markets barely paused, rocketed upwards, and basically shook it all off. The governments papered over all insolvency issues and have basically pushed them forward. So many people, will come off government support at some point, and they still have accrued debts to pay. So we've got some payback to come. Many companies were given a lifeline, so many companies didn't go bust in the equation, the natural clearing didn't occur. So we've created yet more debt, and the equity market is now reflecting something else. And I struggled with that because this was never something I foresaw. I could see the insolvencies, I could see the government trying to help it. I've seen the change in monetary policy blending into fiscal policy, where basically the central banks will backstop as much fiscal stimulus as you want. So what I did is I went back recently and thought, am I thinking about this wrong? Because I understand this crypto world as well now, and I understand the crypto world is all about offsetting the debasement of fiat money. Maybe I'm looking at the markets in the wrong way. So I went back and changed the denominator for the S&P and just changed it to the Fed balance sheet. And when you divide the S&P by the Fed balance sheet, you get something that intuitively feels more real, which is that after 2008, the markets have traded sideways in a kind of up and down cyclical pattern since then. So then I looked at it against all asset prices, and it basically told roughly the same story, is that it is maybe the value of the dollar or fiat currency overall that has declined, that has made it look like the asset prices increased. The only one that showed any difference, two assets, one was the NASDAQ. That because I think there is a secular trend in technology and there is an overvaluation, but even the overvaluation can be accounted for by the monetary stimulus aspect. So you're kind of neutralizing that. The NASDAQ kind of made sense, and the other one was Bitcoin, which made sense because its job was invented for this, and it's going through Metcalfe's law network adoption phase. So we're seeing exponential logarithmic growth as opposed to linear growth. When I look at it that way, it kind of makes sense. And then what I found is, because you and I would look at the equity market, we think this looks nuts. But then when I look at the equity market versus gold, which is another denominator, it looks pretty normal. Or the equity market versus oil, or all of these assets that have this relative valuation, it doesn't look like the equity market's crazy. It's expensive for sure, but not as crazy as it looks in dollar terms. So I'm just trying to think this thing through as maybe I'm thinking the whole thing wrong.
I get very worried about the amount of debt that we're taking on. The Fed's balance sheet, the debt we're issuing, it just all feels uncomfortable for the way I was educated. And then a lot of people will weigh in on various platforms and say, Scott, you don't understand modern monetary theory. You're thinking about our deficit incorrectly. Am I thinking at some point that the equity value of America goes down as our debt continues to go, up faster than inflation? Am I thinking about it incorrectly?
You're looking at the wrong variable. So when I speak to the MMT people, they say in this closed economy that if you print your own currency, you can monetize your own debt ad infinitum. So therefore you can run massive deficits, and therefore you can use fiscal stimulus as your primary source of stimulation for the economy. What that fails to account for is the value of your currency. So any country, so Japan is probably going to be the first country that does this. They will end up monetizing their entire bond market. Now, what is the outcome for that? Is there no payback? In which case, we might as well tear up the economic textbooks. The payback's going to be the currency collapses because there'll be
Describe
no
monetize their debt. What do you mean by that?
So that means the central bank just buys all of the government debt outstanding, puts it on their balance sheet, and then says, we're just going to write it off. It's done. A debt jubilee. That's as old as, it was in the Bible. If they do that, what is the outcome? Well, the currency collapses. Why? Well, if there's no bond market, there's capital that needs a source of returns, and you've just taken out the world's second largest bond market. So the capital goes abroad for yield because there's no yield left. Forces your currency down because you're selling yen and buying dollars or euros or whatever it may be. So I think when you're talking about should equity be rewritten because of the debt, it's not. It's the value of the dollar that's being rewritten, which was exactly the same conversation we were having a second ago, that we've got the denominator wrong. We don't see it. We don't get inflation in CPI because we've got technology, demographics, globalization, and all these mega forces. But we're getting asset price inflation because assets are fixed-ish supply instruments, and the dollar is now a variable supply instrument. So obviously, it takes more dollars to buy the same amount of a fixed asset, which is exactly the argument of Bitcoin, which is the purest of all expressions of this. Or even better is art, where there's only one.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
More dollars out there makes the dollars worth less, which creates an explosion in asset prices. We've seen an explosion in asset prices. We haven't seen an explosion in inflation. We haven't seen inflation, and we haven't really seen a debasement in the dollar as far as I can tell.
Well, yes, so two great points. The debasement in the dollar is not in the dollar itself. It's in all fiat currencies because the US is not doing this in isolation.
That's right. Yeah.
Europe is doing more. Japan is, as a percentage of GDP, miles more. Switzerland more. The UK, Australia, they're all doing it. So if you look at, I've got a basket of 27 currencies, excluding the dollar, and look at them versus gold, which is the oldest form of money. And basically, since 2008, when all the central banks started quantitative easing, the value of that basket of currencies has fallen 60% against gold. And that's kind of makes sense to me. But we don't see it in inflation. So that's the other part of your question. Why not? Well, inflation in how we measure CPI inflation is actually based around demand. And the last time we had large demand for goods from people and wages was the 1970s. And that was because there was a bunch of 30-year-olds who hit the labor force, bought their first house, first car, first suit, first home, first everything, which was the baby boomers. There was no offsetting generation for them. They came in with record low asset prices. They bought bonds, they bought equities, they bought everything, and we created structural inflation for a while until they stopped buying goods at the rate of change. That's all changed now, and those guys are all in retirement and going into retirement. So they're net sellers of assets. They don't buy as many assets. At the same time, with the largest population boom ever, the baby boomers, you then just added 89 million millennials into the same workforce because everyone's working longer. So now you've devalued the value of people by 50%, basically. And then on top of that, you're then getting those people to compete on a global basis with Chinese or Indians. So that devalues wages further. And you've got technology that's snapping at their heels every day saying, I'm going to make you out of a job because I can do this better than you, cheaper than you, which is the old software is eating the world argument. So all of that is going on at the same time. So the net result is, if you look at real wages over the last 40 years, they've barely moved. Basically, nobody's earning any more money than they did in real terms. Most goods, like TVs and jeans and all that stuff, has gone down in price because of globalization and technology. The things you can't produce more of because of globalization and technology happen to be these fixed price assets. They've all exploded. So you've been able, as an average or a median American, you can afford 60% less in terms of housing with your salary than you could if you were. So the 32-year-old millennial now can afford 60% less than the 32-year-old baby boomer at the same point in their career cycle. That's astonishing.
Do you want to know one thing about crypto? I made over 3,000% in profit in a few weeks. Fact is, the traditional financial system, the traditional money system makes you poor, not rich. If you want to earn $500,000, $1 million, you have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 in the traditional financial system, and you probably will still be broke. And you will be old. This is not a sexy combination, as you can imagine. But the question is, how can you start in crypto and make these profits? Where to invest? Where to start? My name is Gunnar and I'm from Germany, as you can hear, and things are a little bit different in Germany. More about that later on. Fact is, there are lots of different cryptocurrencies. It's a gigantic universe where beginners and professionals get easily lost. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are 7 key steps you need to follow to become successful in this market. You have to know them, and if you fail one of them, it's literally impossible to succeed in this market. Just an example, one of the key points is your exchange, and one of the biggest are, for example, Binance and Coinbase. These are trusted and well-established exchanges, but, and this is a big but, you won't find the super profitable coins on those exchanges. The unknown super profitable coins that get gigantic profits are not traded on those kind of exchanges. They are traded on much smaller insider platforms that are barely known. And I can tell you what those super secret exchanges are and why they are so profitable. And another super important thing are the right information sources. The point is, the internet is gigantic. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube channels, blogs, pages, and much more. And there are also market makers and influencers. For example, Elon Musk, he is not a crypto guy, but the moment he recommended Dogecoin, it went through the roof, to the moon, so to say. But why did he recommend it? Where did he hear it from? He didn't hear it from newspapers. And believe me, he is listening to someone. But you have to know who, and you have to react before he is reacting. This is really, really important. And these are only 2 of the 7 steps you have to follow in order to be successful in crypto. And if you want to know all of these steps in much more detail, and if you want to have a comprehensive checklist, here's what you should do. There is a link below this video. Click on this link and you will get the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. Click on the link and you will see a video where I explain the next steps. So see you soon. Click on the link now. I'll see you there.